Such a good logo. I love that.
All right, we've still got a few people coming in, but good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's talk, Ask a Cemetarian. My name is Emily Hillwright, and I'm the Director of Operations at the Merchants House Museum, New York City's only family home to be preserved intact, both inside and out from the 19th century. Home to the Treadwell family and their Irish servants for nearly 100 years, the Merchants House is complete with the family's original furnishings and personal possessions. As many of you know, for the last 13 years, the Merchants House has been fighting proposed development next door, construction that is guaranteed to cause irreparable damage to our landmark building and will force us to close the museum to the public for at least 2 years. In 2023, in a shocking betrayal, the Landmarks Preservation Commission actually voted to approve the development in spite of overwhelming and unanimous opposition from the community, preservation organizations, public officials, engineers, and preservation architects. This disastrous vote is a warning to every other landmark in New York City. If this can happen to the Merchants House, the very first building in Manhattan designated a New York City landmark in 1965, then every landmark in New York is at risk. Last year, we launched a petition urging City Hall to step in to protect the Merchants House, a city-owned interior and exterior landmark, and a beloved and irreplaceable educational and community resource. Please take just 30 seconds to add your name to our petition. I am posting the direct link right here in the chat. If you click it right now, you will be able to sign before our talk begins tonight. And yes, please do sign even if you don't live in New York City. It's important that the city hears from supporters from all over. Our program this evening is co-sponsored by Village Preservation, so I'd like to give a warm thanks to William Roca and all of the folks over at Village Preservation. Before we begin, during tonight's program, please do feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen to ask any questions. We will have time for some Q&A at the end. I am just delighted to welcome our moderator tonight, thanatologist and Merchants House volunteer, Matilda Garrido. Matilda is a certified thanatologist and holds dual master's degrees in bioethics and thanatology, the study of death, dying, and bereavement. She has worked extensively with the dying and bereaved. She volunteers at the Merchants House in various capacities, including co-hosting our monthly paranormal roundtable discussion in the spirit of science. So welcome, Matilda. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Emily. And thank you so much, Gabrielle, for agreeing to do this. This is a series that we started last year where we're interviewing people who work in death care and in the field of death and dying. And we've never had a cemetarian on before. So the popularity of this talk is indicated in our RSVPs and our attendance. So there are a lot of people who are out there with questions about being a cemetarian, what it's like to work in a cemetery, and things like that. So thank you so much again, and welcome to you.
Thank you so much. I cannot believe that people show up to the party to talk about cemetery work. I'm really, really thrilled about that because I love talking about it. So when other people are interested, I'm excited to kind of nerd out and share my knowledge about what it is like to work at a cemetery.
Yeah. Great. So I have some questions for you. We did get some questions in from people who pre-registered. And again, as Emily said, if you have questions during the talk, please put them in the Q&A, and we will save some time at the end for that. Right now, I just wanted to ask everybody, just because we're interested, if you can go into the chat function and put in where you are Zooming in from, that would be great, just to get a sense of like our audience and where you are. And also, if you would put in further talks that you'd like to hear in this series, that would be great, because we're planning for next year. Someone's coming in from Astoria, Columbus, Ohio. Wow. Indiana, but born and raised a New Yorker, New York City. This is great. Fairfax, Virginia, Brooklyn,
Atlanta.
Vermont, Amherst, the Village. Awesome. This is great. Syracuse, Newport, Rhode Island. Oh, this is so awesome. This is great. We love our New York City attendees and we love everybody that's coming from across the country. This is really awesome. Oh, Davis, California. Wow. Great. Okay, so let's jump right in, Gabrielle, because I have a lot of questions for you. So the first question is, so what exactly is a cemetarian, actually? We know it's someone who works in a cemetery or who is affiliated with cemetery work.
Yeah, I asked a bunch of my coworkers what their personal definitions were today, and yeah, someone that works at a cemetery, but it also is somebody that is interested in the historic preservation of a cemetery. I also was kind of going into the history of like a sexton, somebody that was tending to the grounds of a churchyard or a graveyard, or was in fact a gravedigger as well. And for those of you that don't know, fun fact, cemetery comes from the Greek comeritarian, meaning sleeping place.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
isn't that?
love that.
Yeah, there are so many terms in this world. I always say we're a necropolis within a metropolis.
Mm,
Yeah, working as a cemetarian to me personally means somebody that is not only embedded in the operations of the place, but really does steward the land and tend to the grounds, either spiritually or landscape wise.
Right, right. So I neglected to mention that Gabrielle is at Greenwood. You are the director of events at Greenwood or the
I'm
director
the
of special
manager of
events?
public programs with a
Manager of public
special
programs.
focus with a curator of death education. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So for anyone in New York City, if you have not been to Greenwood, you must come. And we will talk a little bit about the events that Greenwood puts on later because it's everything from birding to death cafes to tonight they're having what is the program
Grieving and
tonight?
weaving.
Grieving
So
and
knitting,
weaving.
crocheting, crafting, talking about our favorite people that, we've loved and lost. Over tea and cookies. There's always
Right.
snacks. We always have snacks.
So, what background is required to become a cemetarian? This is a question that someone wrote in about. Is the profession industry privatized or through local government? So, like, do you have to get a special license or a special certification or something like that?
Yeah, I can absolutely confidently speak to Greenwood specifically. I myself came from a completely different background and just got a job in the events department, and then kind of ended up in operations and other aspects of what we do here. But the way Greenwood works is we have union workers as well. So those are incredible people in Greenwood green uniforms that do have special certifications. So you can decide to go through the trial of becoming a grave digger. You could join the union, become part of that. There's a special certification for crematory operators. At Greenwood, they are union workers, but one of our volunteers just took the test and passed, and is a crematory operator and can go at, other places that have crematories that are looking for people with that specific certification. So Greenwood, I mean, some of our volunteers have become our paid staff. We really, if you want to be here and you have the skill set, that's usually, from my understanding, how it's always worked. A lot of people too, it's my father was a grave digger, his father was a grave digger. Or, it's the family business to kind of be in the funerary and death care space. But formally, to just be someone that works at a cemetery, you just really have to have the interest and have a transferable skill set. Like I said, one of our volunteers that is now one of our memorial counselors that helps to sell graves and niches and crypts, came from a music education background, but really was incredible at, community partnerships. And, it was a no-brainer to hire her to help us with our sales.
Yeah. So I would guess that for most people who work at Greenwood, perhaps not the grave diggers because they don't have so much interaction with the public, But for people who work in the events department or people who are memorial counselors, learning how to skillfully deal with
Yeah.
families who are grieving immediately or looking at an upcoming grieving or just advanced planning, which is my passion, right? People who
Yeah.
are actively confronting and thinking about their own death, right? So
Yeah.
it takes a certain kind of person and a certain kind of interpersonal skill set to deal with people in that space, right?
Yeah, something that we were able to talk about. There's this really wonderful woman, Rachel Kodanes, that wrote a book. It's a workbook about grief in the workplace, and
Mm,
basically for what happens when a coworker's spouse dies or loved one. How can we show up for them? And especially at the height of COVID, we were all losing people, and some of our very own. We've lost three
mm,
employees in the past 5 years.
oh,
And, we kind of just said, how do we show up for each other? And it's funny because I've witnessed for the past 5 years, sometimes the shift of, okay, I'm going into a meeting with an actively grieving family that needs me to like hold that space for them, right? That's a term that I say over and over again, but there's such truth to that. And then, you might shift gears and be like, I got to go finish that spreadsheet now and I'm hungry. But I
mhm,
have witnessed all of us, even in times of frustration with paperwork or logistics, uh, just take that like moment, that pregnant pause, and just really say, okay, you know what? We see this every day. We know what it feels like and looks like. And we're able to just really show up for people. So yeah, I think there is a little bit of a personality hire aspect, I could say,
mhm.
of just someone that you know can balance the self-care of being around death, dying, grief, and loss every day, and also find some life in those moments, and make sure you show up for each other and for your community.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I am at Greenwood a lot. My parents are at Greenwood, and I do funerals at Greenwood. And I want to say everyone, kind of from soup to nuts, like even the guards at the gate, they
Yeah.
I think have that awareness. They bring that awareness to dealing with people, and there's an extra level of sensitivity that they bring to interactions,
Yeah.
which I think is really great. Um, so, what drew you to this field? And I also know that you have additional training besides just being a cemetarian, that you were drawn to like level up your education and become an end of life doula and always involved in like taking classes and learning more. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, what
I
drew
mean,
you to
I'm
this
not
field?
quite you yet, Matilda. I want my master's of science in thanatology, but I do have a certificate
I
in
get
it.
it.
I'm constantly reading, constantly talking about it. I live up to my name, Gabby Gatto Gabs a lot. But yeah, the learning never stops. I will say here at Greenwood, the just the experience of being here, but I know you asked what drew me to the field, and I
Hmm.
laughed because this question, I joke all the time. So our vice president, our senior vice president of programming and development, Lisa Alpert, when I was in the final round of interviewing, and it was my turn to meet her, and I was mortified afterwards, but you know, death was always just so omnipresent in my life. So, they asked the
Mm.
question like, are you going to be okay being around so much death and grief? And I shared with someone just yesterday, well, in my family, it's either a wedding or a funeral like every
All
month.
right.
So, eh. But it was kind of wild because my first memory, I guess you could say, of like my conscious humanhood was at a wake in Brooklyn.
Hmm.
So one of my first memories is looking at a casket. Um, so yeah, but to be extremely transparent though, I was just 26 and off my parents' insurance, and I had worked festivals and contract work in the arts and cultural space, and was really wanting something solid. And I didn't anticipate this job being so much more than just taking those skills in logistics and festival work and applying them here to the events department, because I have gained so many new skill sets. But
Mhm.
yeah, no, I just was like, oh, there's an opening in the events department, and much gratitude to Rooftop Films because they're one of our partners for our nighttime screening series for their summer festival. And that was my first day of work at Rooftop. I walked in, saw a 40-foot screen in the middle of the cemetery, and just thought, wow, they're striking the right tone, and yet people are enjoying themselves here at night to watch some movies, and be among our 500,000 residents. Yeah, I'm always just so happy when I think back to kind of how it happened. I had studied
Uh-huh.
death and dying in college with Dr. Brad Pettifils, but to be
Mhm.
honest, y'all, it was just because I was a film student, and it was the class that you watched 6 Feet Under, like HBO 6
Oh,
Feet Under in its
yes.
entirety. And I was like, I would way rather write my thesis on my favorite TV show than anything
Mhm.
else. So it is funny how things weave back in and out of life, and death, I guess.
Yeah. Well, also, I want to point out to people who don't know this probably that very shortly after you were hired, maybe 1 week after you were hired, COVID shut down the city.
Yeah.
And Greenwood, because it has a crematory and because it processes funerals and burials and things like that, was overwhelmed with families that they had to try to accommodate. So it was really a baptism by fire for you,
Yeah.
because my understanding is that everyone had to pitch in and help,
Mhm.
and here you were trying to also craft events that would keep Greenwood on the map as a center for learning, not just a
Mhm.
center for dying, and pivoting to Zoom for everything. So, you might have like started at the job because you had skill in event planning, but then immediately you were kind of very thrust into having to put all your experience with death into practice.
Yeah, very quickly. Yeah, there's still so much to process there, but in
Yeah.
the weirdest, oddest way, I am still so grateful for it because I
Mm-hmm.
learned on hyperspeed how to. I also learned, Matilda, I think we had talked about this before. I taking those phone calls in the administrative
Mm-hmm.
office when they said, "Hey, no events, but why don't you come help answer the phones? They're really overwhelmed in there." Just the lack of death literacy. Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
in my family, I just was so used to it. I knew the ritual and the song and dance of, all right, we're going to call the funeral director. He's going to come in 1 to 4 hours. We're going to, go to the funeral, this, that, the other.
We have the suit ready, the dress is set out.
Right. And Matilda, just so many people, their first profound, significant loss, they had no other examples
Right.
of what to do and how to do it. And it just broke me completely. To the point where like we all were just looking at each other in that office like we have to make like we have to make some sense out of this and some meaning, and at the end of the day it would be like, okay, we took 111 phone calls each, like who's buying the pizza today,
Yeah.
just to get some solace. But I am so proud of the way the grave diggers, the crematory operators, anyone and everyone that works here completely answered. Like I could cry talking about it, completely answered the call. I mean,
Hmm.
our president, Rich Moylan, he had really only just met me, and he was like, nice to meet you, and then handed me a letter that said, hey, you're an essential worker. If anybody stops you on the street because you're working late, give them this. And that was
Yeah.
what a wild moment where all of my friends are at home and all of a sudden I'm really in the thick of it. But it did feel really purposeful, and it was
Hmm.
nice to be a helper in that time.
Yeah. And I know that it was hard because the demand for cremation services were
Mhm.
overwhelming, and crematories had 3 weeks, month, 2 month backups, right? And
Yeah.
not being able
Yeah.
to accommodate families.
Yeah. I mean, what I remember most is, 3 weeks out. So there was, like a 3 week lead time. And that was really hard because now sometimes someone can call and we can accommodate them the next day, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But it did really get us thinking about memorialization because we had a little bit of this expanded time. And Amy Cunningham, our friend, funeral director, Fitting Tribute Funeral Services, I think she's an absolute rock star in this world. But we said, okay, like let's do more things on Zoom. Let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about, let's try and have something perspective providing of, okay, you can't have a service in our chapel right now. You can't have, your 50 family members here right now, but you can FaceTime from the hearse on your way in as the funeral director
Yeah.
drops off your loved one for their final disposition. So if you can't witness and be a part of that part, like what can you be a part of? And we just started talking about, it might have felt really wrong and taboo in the past to FaceTime from the cemetery, but there are so
Mm-hmm.
many people, Matilda, that, their grandfather, their father had died, but they were on the other side of the world and couldn't get over here. So all of a sudden
Yeah.
there was this new language of what, like this new grief language of what could be okay. And Amy and I especially, like, we're trying to just tell folks both here and abroad, it's okay, like let's rewrite some rituals. We have to rewrite some rituals right now.
Yeah, and that has continued. I mean, I'm planning a huge memorial for this upcoming weekend, and we have 200 people attending via Zoom. We have 200
Wow.
in person
Live
and
stream.
200 via Zoom. And this speaks
Mhm.
to the popularity of the decedent, but
Yeah.
it has really opened up a way for people to grieve in community even if they can't be
Yeah.
present, which I
Mhm.
think is wonderful.
Yeah, it's
Um,
it's an option. And it's an option that I think COVID was the catalyst of, like, no, it's
yeah,
okay for this to be an option. Um,
yes.
the same way that there's so many more options for methods of disposition now. There's so many more
Hmm.
options to, write your end of life care plan with your death doula or thanatologist or funeral director, medical proxy, etc. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And just to mention for everyone who's tuning in, Amy Cunningham was my very first guest on this Ask a series that it was the Ask a
I
Funeral
was
Director. And she came on, yep. So you can go back. The Merchant's House has a great YouTube channel and you can see all the past episodes of the series and you can see me speaking with her. So you're also trained as an end of life doula. And what skills do you bring from that, do you think, to your work?
Oh, here at Green. Oh, yeah. Whoo. Yeah, I will, instead of like if they build it, they will come. I think
Hmm.
the analogy I've started to use is like if you're willing to learn it and really integrate the knowledge, like the learners will come, the people that also want to learn will come. Because I remember, Matilda,
Hmm.
I was like, what am I doing? Like how is this real, like this super niche thing, is this gonna, really help people? And the answer is yes, which is
Yeah.
wild. I did not have the foresight, but so with the training, it's definitely prepared me for a lot of, my cemetery roles and responsibilities. Um, a few examples I can think of are, bearing witness to someone's grief and
Hmm.
like I'm in the crematory office right now. So right outside the store, I'm usually, tending to grabbing tissues, telling someone where honestly, I get asked, what's a good grief resource? Way less than I get asked, where's the bathroom in this place? But,
Right.
I'm here for any and all questions. Um, so someone might say, is there a group for this specific kind of loss that they're experiencing? And,
Mm,
I know the people, I know the books, I know the resources and the groups to send
yeah.
away. And that feels so good to have that type of access. So as a doula, like you just have access to not only like learning certain modalities, but kind of being in this network of great people that have created these resources or amplify the voices of those that have. Um,
Hmm.
so, what? Sometimes, actually, now that I'm in this office, I'm thinking of this one. A man comes in and he's sitting down with me and he's talking about how him and his siblings really want, you receive the cremated remains in whole, but once you receive them back, like you could get little urns, you could do necklaces,
Hmm.
you can put cremated remains in a painting, you could shoot them into space. There's an absolute dizzying amount. Parting Stone is a great company that solidifies the remains, and
Yeah.
get many, many stones. So, he's sitting here and I just like pull up this Etsy shop of this artist I'm familiar with that makes bracelets for cremated remains.
Mhm.
And, I'm just showing him images and he starts just like crying. And I'm like, what happened? Obviously your mother died, but he said to me, oh my goodness, I never would have thought that there was something out there like that. And my mother used to love wearing bracelets. We knew when she was
Aw.
up or down the stairs because we'd hear the bangles.
Mhm.
And then he ordered right on the spot, like 5 for his siblings. And he was like, I am so excited to have her on my wrist every day. And when it's clamoring against the door, I'll feel that she's really with me. So sometimes
Oh,
it's
that's so beautiful.
that. But yeah, holding space for people, further contextualizing like where and when we are, and using the cemetery scape as my like
Mhm.
co-teacher, or using the cemetery
Mm, mhm.
as, hey, like meditating is wonderful. Journaling about your loved one is wonderful. And this is a great place to do it. So, I might see the same person come through the gates day after day after day, and I finally go talk to them. I say
Mhm.
hello. I simply ask if I may, who are you here to visit? And I ask them what their name is or what their name was, right? I mean, I love using
Mhm.
present tense for what I call my other siders, my lost loved ones, but yeah, I just ask them what their name is and that we're here for any kind of support down the line. And some people are in active grief and they're not ready, but then sometimes I see that person 2 years later end up at a death cafe and say, I'm ready to kind
Mhm.
of talk about it and integrate some of my grief process with my community. Uh,
Yeah.
it goes a really long way. Like when you're here, I'm sure many of you will just come for a walk or come for a concert in the catacombs, but there are people here to visit their loved ones, and it's
Yeah.
nice to just say hello and ask them who they're here to see.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And I was thinking that, like, when we work in the end of life space and we're trained in the end of life space, like, we just have to be very unflappable. Like, we have all been at a funeral or all been at a burial, and the mistress comes and throws herself on the grave, or like people start fighting,
The
and
mom.
anything can happen. And
Right.
those of
It's
us who
true.
are surrounding the family have to just really hold this space of, this is all expected and normal,
Yep. Mhm.
non-judgmental space. Like, grief brings a lot out in people,
Yeah.
and you should be
I'm
able to
surprised.
express it, and we can clean this up later, but it's all good
Yeah.
now, you know?
I'm too Italian to function. I'm literally thinking of like 5 times like my aunt like threw herself on a casket. So when she died actually a few months ago, I like in honor of her, I like threw myself on the casket and was like, it's your turn,
Oh,
Rosie, for the drama of it all. Yeah,
I love that.
it's so funny.
So we had a question from someone who used to work at St. Patrick's Cathedral,
Oh, cool.
and they were wondering if you received genealogy questions, and I do believe, does Greenwood have a whole genealogy department, right? Like,
Let me get that link for you.
yeah, yeah. Please put it
Um,
in the chat.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's a little different at Greenwood. It's called Greeneology. Uh,
Ah, of course, we've got to brand it.
okay, I put that in the chat. So what's great is we have a team of folks both in person and remotely that, you can entrust to do the research for you here.
Oh,
Um,
great.
and definitely overwhelming. I know who asked that question. That's amazing that you got to do that good work there, but certainly it is a lot because someone is like trusting you with their information about their ancestors and finding out things. And yeah, so if you go to that link you could kind of see the process, but free of charge.
Hmm.
We have an initial, what are you looking for? And then, because they have to go into some very weird basements and go through 186-year-old archive sometimes, there's a little bit of a charge to keep our team going to do the
Hmm.
research, but it's absolutely available to you. And, like we can work with you on that. We want it to be accessible to everyone. So there's always a way for us to work with you on getting that info. But yeah, the stories of genealogy that we've heard, you know, Connie Thatcher is one of the people here that works on it. And sometimes she's like, all right, get in my bag, I'm getting in the car. I gotta go, you know, I gotta go see a gal about a grave, you know, in the south of the cemetery and take a picture and make sure it's the right person. And you know, look up the, oh my goodness, to see like the old calligraphy in like 100-year book, and just see when someone purchased it and to match it with the family. I myself, I've had some really cool moments where we've done the genealogy work for them, and then the person like comes from Florida or wherever they
Yeah.
were, and I've caught them on a Sunday and they're like, oh, I'm looking for this grave. Connie, help me out. You know, we found my ancestors here. And then we're all like cheering once we find it in the
Oh,
third part of the cemetery that's, you know, 3 rows back to the right.
yeah. Well,
I
because
dig.
that's the thing, because Greenwood is massive, right? And if you have, like, let's say you have just found out that you have a grandparent buried there, and you enlist the services of Greenwood to help you locate the grave, they can tell you exactly where it's located and
Yeah.
how to get there, which you probably would not be able to find it if you just went on a visit. So
No,
that's so
most
meaningful
likely not.
for people who are really looking to reconnect with relatives that they didn't know, but they feel a strong connection to.
Yeah,
Um,
or even someone you don't know. I mean, there are so many
mhm.
notable residents here, right? But I mean, what I will tell you, Matilda, is, you know, looking at the burial records, there's a Gabriel Gatto that is buried
Mm,
here. I don't think we're related at all, but
mhm.
I just felt this like, oh, I'd like to go see where Gabriel Gatto is. Like, what does like my near name look like on a gravestone?
Yeah.
You know, because I will go to my family plot on Long Island, or there's you know, there's a few Gattos here, and I'll go. And it took me and my coworkers like 5 lunch breaks to find Gabriel Gatto. But when we finally did, we're so happy to be here with you and meet you. And yeah, it's 478 acres. So, you know, you got to have a
Mhm.
when you come in here. But also you don't always have to have a plan, because a lot of things will just magically find you here as well.
Right.
We're here
And
to
there
help.
is an app. There's an app for your phone, right, that gives you maps and also the location of graves of certain very famous people, right? And when you do visit, you have access to a physical map that you can take and
Mm,
walk around with. So let's
yeah.
talk about the famous people that are buried at Greenwood. Who is the most famous person that's buried at Greenwood?
Oh, I think all of us have different answers.
Sure, because it depends on what your passion is.
Right, absolutely. So I love going to Jean-Michel Basquiat's grave, because
Hmm.
there's always like trinkets and paint brushes and pencils and all types of art supplies left at his grave. But I I'm gonna be honest with you all. My absolute all-time favorite. I mean, like some notable, some runners up. Auguste Renoir, the father of embalming. You know,
Hmm.
our death
Who
care.
was not embalmed, by the way.
It was not embalmed. Um, you know, Charlotte Kanda has this, you know, hauntingly beautiful romantic end of life story. Um, Leonard Bernstein, right? But my absolute all-time favorite is the inventor of the hot dog, Charles Feltman.
Oh, see,
I just,
that's so great that there are so
I
that
think he's the most famous person here.
and what about George Tilliou, right? The Coney Island. He's
Also,
buried
yeah.
at Greenwood, I think.
Mhm.
Boss Tweed is
Boss
buried at
Tweed.
Greenwood.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Um,
notorious.
yeah, yeah.
Ward McAllister, if anyone on the call has watched The Gilded Age, my mom loves that show.
Yes, yes.
Ward McAllister is entombed in the catacombs.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the catacombs, because I find that people
Sure.
are always very interested in catacombs, and Greenwood actually opens up the catacombs for concerts every year.
Yeah, it is more of a subterranean final resting spot. But the lore, so the story goes, the, you know, historical evidence, if you will, of like why we built them was we were really answering a call to where
Mm.
science and spirituality like weren't quite meeting yet, right? So we had all of these folks that maybe didn't have the means to build a family mausoleum, but were
Mhm.
terrified of being buried alive. So
Yeah.
they said, okay, we'll get a family vault in the subterranean catacomb. And it was a great option for them. It fed their, spiritual needs as much as as much as it did their financial needs. So there
Mhm.
are 30 family vaults. Whenever we do a program in there, though, we were pretty bold. We had a comedian in there last year. It was this beautiful hour-long show about 7 significant losses Ben Wasserman had in his life. And, before we started, I just said, we are here with 30 families right now. Let's contextualize where we are. But no, they don't have to pay for the ticket and they have the best seat in the house. Like there's a way to be in conversation with these, um, you know, with these permanent residents in a respectful way, but also to
Mhm.
remind the living of where we are and why we're doing what we're doing, where we're doing it. But it's
Right.
beautiful. The acoustics are gorgeous. If you don't come for a concert, we do have after hours tours that end at the catacombs.
Mhm.
Or, if you sign up for the volunteer program, there's always, room to just go on a lazy Sunday with me.
Yeah, so that's another question I was going to ask you. If people are interested in volunteering at Greenwood, what volunteer roles are available and how would they go about finding out about that?
Oh, yeah. So we've expanded a lot. When I first started, we had about 60 volunteers, and now we have 902 on the listserv.
Wow.
And data tells me that we have
Mhm.
290 active last year. So that
Okay.
means, someone maybe did one shift because instead of paying for the ticket, their favorite artist was in the catacombs and was able to just do check-in and then sit at the performance because that's something we totally believe in. Help us do check-in, help us set up. But, if you really want to be here for the experience, you'll have access to it, right? Um, but some of those people are like Mary Pat Klein, who helped us start Grieving and Weaving, who, started out as a
Mhm.
volunteer. And then I was like, you're here every day. You're at every program, every event. So you can volunteer in the archives. You can volunteer at events. We have a few horticulture opportunities, so
Mm.
bulb planting events. And we're working on a lot of really cool things that might involve restoration, and bringing in some of the other departments to have a volunteerism aspect. And especially with the Welcome Center opening, we are going to need a lot of docents and volunteers to help steward that space.
Yeah. And what about people who have a passion for the Civil War? Because there are so many Civil War veterans that are buried at Greenwood.
Yeah, more than
Um,
we thought.
So, is
A
there
lot.
a special research project around that, or people who are working on getting that kind of documentation together? Because I know that people who um, are passionate about the Civil War really want to be involved in anything to do with the Civil War. So, is there like a special place for them, or would it be in sort of a more general?
Yeah, so if you get in touch with us, we can talk to you about what opportunities are available in a few ways. There's research aspects, so helping to research,
Hmm.
but then also writing the biographies of these people, right? So some people do both. Some people also just come, find the grave, photograph it, and kind of add to that person's story. But not just
Mm.
Civil War, Matilda, World War One, World War Two. I think a project that I was so happy to be a part of and to help build the volunteer force for was the World War II project, where
Mm.
it wasn't just notable people that were here that are in
Sure.
textbooks, but it was
No soldiers, right?
right. It was Brooklynites that their granddaughters are volunteers at the cemetery now. And hey, I visit my grandpa all the time.
Yeah.
He served. Here's a picture of his grave. Here's a biography. And here's some research about, what he did and what his life was like. So to be able to amplify just New York stories is amazing. So yes,
Sure.
you want to be a part of that and you want to do, like Battle of Brooklyn is an event we have every year that we always need, volunteers to kind of be living historians for.
Hmm.
So yeah, I put the volunteer link in the chat as well.
Yeah. Yes, I was going to point that out. So if you're interested in volunteering at Greenwood, just go to that link and you can fill out a form and someone
Yeah.
will get in touch with you. So I wanted to ask you, Gabrielle, about, so let's say you want to be buried or interred at Greenwood. How do
Yeah.
you do that? And
How do
we
you
had
do
a
that?
very specific question. How do I get buried in a mausoleum?
Oh, okay. Well, you're never going to be buried in a mausoleum because technically you're entombed in a mausoleum.
Hmm.
So if you're
Because
buried,
you're not below ground.
yeah.
So,
So buried in the ground is interred. A mausoleum, you're entombed, or in a crypt, you're entombed, or inurned. So a lot of people elect to have their cremated remains buried in their family lot with
mm,
casketed decedents. But also, you can have your cremated remains under a tree now at Greenwood too. We've done quite a few of those. So the tree is the monument instead of the stone. I think it's
yeah, and talk about the Tranquility Garden, which is a
yeah,
beautiful, beautiful, that's where my parents are, place for
yeah.
cremated remains. A beautiful setting and so easy and pleasurable to visit. And you have some flexibility with how you decorate the niche. Not a lot of flexibility, but
Yeah.
you do have, like, you could have a photo of a person and
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of rules and regulations as a cemetery for sure. And
everyone, every cemetery does, right?
right, and
Yeah.
we're an active cemetery, so it's always a balancing act of we have 500,000 visitors a year, and those are both mourners and people using the space for a program, etc. Um, but yeah, Tranquility Garden is beautiful. One of the people that I worked with as a doula was recently and earned there. So on my lunch break, I go and I visit her now. Just it
Oh.
does feel really serene there. But
Hmm.
what was your question? Oh, yes, the mausoleum.
How
So
does someone, so how does someone actually go about
yeah.
being the rest of eternity at Greenwood,
Yeah,
no
we
matter
have
what they, whether they want to be buried or
yeah, we've got an incredible memorial counseling team here. So, if, every cemetery is different. We have
Mhm.
very limited space to build a mausoleum, but I have in my 5 years, I've seen two new very large mausoleums be constructed. It's wild to see like a heron flying by like a industrial crane, you know. Um, but yeah, there are crypts available. There are so many options here, a lot more than
Mhm.
folks think. And a lot of
And what
cremation.
about green burial? I mean, so
Yeah,
a question just came in the
sure.
chat. Does Greenwood do burials without coffins and
Absolutely.
really also without vaults, right? So a vault
Yeah.
is a cement box that encases the
Yeah.
coffin, but I understand that Greenwood is setting aside space for totally green burials, right? Without a
Yeah,
vault
you
or a
can
coffin.
have a natural or green burial anywhere here, Matilda, if the lot allows it. But we did answer the call of the community that, was
Mm-hmm.
thinking more, it might be ecologically minded, but also, for example, for myself and my personal values, I love the idea of returning to the earth because
Mm-hmm.
isn't that the way so many of our ancestors did, right? So every cemetery is different. I really implore you all to like do your research. See, you're in all places all over the world, I know. Um, so see what your local, cemetery rules and regs are in that regard. But at Greenwood, natural burial in historic Cedar Dell, I do have to just take a minute to talk about this incredible, incredible like natural amphitheater in the cemetery. Please come and
Mm.
see it. It is basically like two large circles. The innermost one, the stones and the folks they predate the cemetery itself because
Oh,
they
wow.
came from the old Dutch Reformed Church in Manhattan. So they were disinterred. They
Mm-hmm.
were, brought over here. So some of the stones are from like 1699, early
Wow.
1700s. And then the next ring, the next, circular area of lots are from nearly 100 years later. So like
Mm.
rings of a tree, they're in conversation with each other, and it just like it reminds me how things ripple out. And
Yeah.
that's where, and it makes sense to me that that's where we have so many more lots.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Where is that located in the cemetery, actually?
it's like in the innards. There's 5 different ways to get there.
Yeah, I know, because Greenwood is a series of roads that are wide enough for cars to drive on, and then walking
Yeah.
trails, and then stone paths that go up and
Yeah.
down hills. So if you visit, it really does pay to get a map and make sure that you allow enough time to exit the cemetery because right, like they even though they have staff all night there patrolling, like they do close the doors at a certain time, the gates at a
Correct.
certain time, and they can't go all around to be sure that everyone is out.
No, it's
Um,
impossible, even if I think
yeah,
10 cars going around.
yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, natural burial here at Greenwood. You could be in a shroud, you could be in a pine box, or a wicker casket, which is my favorite. They're just so
Mm-hmm,
beautiful. Anything biodegradable. And any
mm-hmm.
other elements that we might be able to work with you on, for you to, have the farewell that you wish. But of course, we have some restrictions, but we work with you.
Yeah. So before Emily pops in again and we
Yeah.
do the Q&A of people that have put questions in during our program, tell us some secrets of Greenwood that we might not know or learn on the
Okay.
website.
I'm not going to tell you where it is,
Okay.
but there is a very large rhododendron that you can go inside of
Ooh.
on the grounds. And the first time I stumbled upon it, I just was like, I felt like I was in a movie. I was like, did I like time travel? Am I in a portal? What is so gorgeous about it is it just creates this huge natural canopy, but there are stones and gnarled roots and
Mm,
branches all growing around everything. And it is a great spot to say a prayer, to meditate, to take a moment in the shade, and to really, I think, get to like the soul of the cemetery, to personify.
mm-hmm.
I'm always like, Greenwood, she is magic. And that's one of
Yeah.
my secret spots. There are also two yew trees that
Uh-huh.
same kind of thing, and they are not far from Charles Feltman's mausoleum. I'll tell you that. That's
Okay.
just I'll say.
All right. Good to know.
Oh, nice, Chelsea. You know what
Very
we're
good to
talking about,
know.
right?
Yeah. I mean, visiting Greenwood is absolutely beautiful. And that is the thing. During COVID, Greenwood remained open for people to walk
Yeah.
around and just take in nature and things like that. And during that time of COVID, where we were not really allowed to be inside with other people, there's this whole joke, this cartoon that the dog is like on top of the kitchen cabinet, like, I'm not going outside again. People just really wanted to get outside, and Greenwood was
Yeah.
open and available for people, which is amazing given that they could very easily have remained closed and kept some of the workers home, you
Yeah.
know?
I
So,
I'm really proud of the decisions that everyone here made. Um,
mhm.
I was training volunteers about rules and regulations, on crazy spring, summer weekends where normally we'd have like 900 people come and there were like 4,000 or something like that. So yeah, between the volunteers and between, the team's decision here to say, hey, we're gonna have the gates open that normally we're not, and they continue to stay open, has been great. So thank you.
Yeah. So we've got 12 minutes left. Let's do a lightning round with the questions that have come in. Emily, you want to take
Yes,
over?
I will take over and start shooting questions at you. If anybody has
Okay.
questions, pop them in the Q&A and we will get through as many as we can here. Somebody asks, Greenwood is also an historical site. Do you deal with historians and did it require extra study?
Yes, we have a resident historian, but also as we expand with the Welcome Center across the street, we are inviting researchers. We have a history fellow. I didn't even get to talk to you about any of that, but we have an artist in residence. We have all of these folks that are coming in to do good hard research. So yeah, if you want to be a part of that or anyone, please let us know. But yeah, no, I think, to speak to just, the folks that aren't as entangled in that, ask any grave digger. They're gonna know, our basic history here, as well as me. I can't get around. 5 years, I still get lost everywhere, but um,
Next question. Grief work is difficult. How do you create space for yourself from all the work that can seem difficult or sad? What is the work-life balance?
Great question.
Yes. So a lot of credit to Alua Arthur from Going with Grace. That was the end of life training program I did. We had a whole module on self-care. And I remember my mother, she was like, Gabrielle, it's so dark and depressing. How are you going to do this? Working at a cemetery every day. And I think just from the momentum of COVID and being so excited that I found what I believe I'm supposed to be doing on Earth, I just had that momentum. And then, probably not till recently did I really sit with it. And I realized, oh, I can walk outside onto the grounds and lock eyes with a turtle because there's so many turtles here. And my Uncle Vinny on his deathbed was like, hey, you see a turtle, it'll be me. I was like, all right. So, yeah, I think my self-care is just taking a walk in the cemetery scape and grounding myself because, yeah, life is wild. You can have hard conversations, busy meetings. But yeah, I think that's my number one thing. And I also talk to people and I let them bear witness to my experiences as I offer bearing witness to theirs. And this is part of my self-care too, being able to talk to you all.
I think one of the things that I found really interesting about the conversation tonight is that so many of the programs that we do, that Matilda does in this series, are speaking to people who are actively working with the recently bereaved or with the dying. And I think what's really interesting about your work is that we see such that you're working with those people, but then also with people who have died. I mean, you talked about the Civil War, or people who have died hundreds of years ago, and valuing their lives as well. And it's just an interesting difference, I think, between this program and some of the others that we've done in the series.
Yeah, I mean, being at Greenwood, you do feel like you're part of the past, present, and dare I say future. Because so we had this one security guard, he retired. His name was Tommy. He was amazing. And on his lunch break, he would walk around to the older sections of the cemetery and he would say the people's names out loud. As simple as that, just really engaging with, both the recent and the very far off history and just saying people's names out loud, reading their epitaphs, getting to know them, doing the research. I do have a bunch of volunteers and families that they bring their kids and when we put the flags out for Memorial Day at Civil War, World War I, World War II vets graves. She brings her kids around and they pick a name and they do research and they find their biography and they learn about their life. Yeah.
On that note, the next question, somebody says, I understand over 5,000 Civil War dead are buried at Greenwood. Are Union and Confederate dead buried together? How are the graves marked? Their historical.
Ooh, this is very interesting. So for a long time, Confederate soldiers, it was kind of hidden, but if you see the rounded ones are Union soldiers, and you'll see a few triangular headstones, and those are Confederate soldiers. My favorite all-time story is the Prentice brothers. I please come and learn about them, but they have an incredible story of suffering their mortal wounds on the same battlefield, and one fought for the Confederacy and one fought for the Union, and they are side by side right here at Valley Water. You'll see the headstones that we were gifted from the government right in front of their original headstones. And it's quite a story. It involves Walt Whitman randomly. So come on down, take a tour.
So I have a question, if I could ask this. So why are they buried at Greenwood and not in a veteran cemetery?
I don't have the exact answer to that. I think, a lot of people wanted to be here. A lot of people, either regionally or their family was here or, and that's just, just from the stories I've read and talked to coworkers about. But no, I wish I had an exact answer on that one. I think, probably each section of history has quite a different answer. When you
Yeah,
walk
I
around
wonder if
the
it's the
cemetery,
same VA too, because it was two different armies. Like, I don't know the answer to this. Maybe somebody out there does. Like, to be in a veteran cemetery now, did you have to serve under the VA, like what we have, the current VA? Anyway, I don't want to take up time. Let's go on,
no,
Emily.
all good. I'll send it with a follow-up email.
Um,
Yes.
let's see, you mentioned the turtles, but someone wants to know if there are other animals wandering around that you would normally see in New York City.
You
So
talk
much
about the
flora and
parrots,
fauna, the
Gabrielle.
vert and the venison. Yes, the monk parakeets. They are these gorgeous tropical birds. There's so much lore about how they ended up here. They are right at the top of the arch. They are these vibrant lime green little beings that are beautiful and also shrill at times. I can never be mad at them for long. They're our mascots. Our volunteers have lovingly named them things like Boss Tweet, Leonard Birdstein. So we have a few little mascots, but skunks, groundhogs, turtles, herons. Oh my God, there's so many beautiful birds that migrate in and out of here. Even the geese. I
And you
love.
have birding tours, right? You
Oh
have
yeah,
birding
if you want to come
tours.
at 6 a.m. for a birding and peace tour, you can absolutely do that with our resident bird tour guide, Rob Jett. But yeah, there's a lot here. There's a lot to discover. A lot of beautiful. There was a beetle that was discovered here. A new species of beetle. Inside, yeah, I come see for yourself. We have a scavenger hunt. Try and find them all on the grounds.
And bees too, that you raise
Oh my
bees
God,
at
we have
Greenwood.
our own bees and they make their own honey and it's called the sweet hereafter.
And where is that sold, that honey?
So you have to be a Hive sponsor, but if you look on our membership page or learn about our donorship, you could sponsor half a hive or a whole hive, and then each year you'll be given a jar of honey.
Oh, that's
Yeah, and help our
lovely.
bees out and our little
I
eco.
want to do that, I think.
Someone asks whether you're aware of anyone being stuck in the cemetery overnight due to the gate being closed.
What's funny? I think in my 5 years, I've never heard that someone ended up here the whole night because our patrol officers are like truly always patrolling. And fun fact, at every single gate, there is the number for the patrol car. So I have seen people when I'm working late, I'm looking out my office and I see someone like, oh my God, I'm stuck. And then they see, in big font, 347. And then they give them a call and then we come and we let you out.
Let's see, somebody wants to know, this is just a logistical question. Will they be able to watch this presentation again? And yes, we are recording tonight and all of our virtual programs at the Merchants House are available on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Merchants House Museum. So this will be up tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to y'all about that because us at Greenwood, we're like, we want to do that, but we have not done that with our dude. So
last question here. Somebody asks if you could talk about public and private tours at Greenwood.
Yeah. So right now I just put in the chat the calendar. Spoiler alert, next week, all of spring and summer will be live. So everything kind of through probably August. So a lot of really good programs, both death ed and we have 300 public programs a year. Choose your own adventure, come for a trolley tour, what have you. But yeah, so there are so many public tours available, but you can do a private tour. People have, done a private tour and gotten engaged at the end of it in the catacombs or, had family in town and wanted something more intimate. So yeah, we've got different rates for different days and tour guides and times. But we are able to do that, which is really great because every Saturday is the trolley tour, every Sunday is a walking tour. But, if you've got family in town, just for that one Wednesday in November, you could work with our senior manager of public programs, Daria Merchant, and she will get you all set up for a private tour. But yeah, let us know what you're interested in as well. We're happy to make it happen.
Given the variety of programs that you offer from a programming standpoint, how do you decide what's worth pursuing and what's not, given this sort of sensitive nature of the place?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, with the Welcome Center opening, we have been throwing spaghetti at the wall a little bit in terms of like, let's be experimental while also respectful and really see what, you know, we've taken a lot of ideas just from event goers, from people that have stumbled into a death cafe or been to Birding in Peace or came to the art installation in the historic chapel. And we said, okay, how do we expand on this? But yeah, it's definitely a little bit of a process. I will say this, everything, we have a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, because we do want to make sure we show up for the people that are experiencing them in the way that feels best and most comfortable for them. All about I mean, we have to get uncomfortable. We have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable truth that we're all
Yeah.
going to die. But we all can learn and laugh together before we'd have to do that. Here at Greenwood.
Wonderful. Well, I think that might be all the time that we have this evening, but thank you so much.
Gabrielle, thank you
Gabrielle,
so much.
Are
This
you
was
kidding me?
great. So
Thank
much
you.
fun.
I
Yeah,
remember
so
zooming
much
into
fun.
Amy and I was like, I hope I get to do that one day. And here we
And
all
here you are.
Yeah. So I cannot wait to see and hear more from Merchant's House. But on behalf of Greenwood, thank you so much for having me. And I hope we get to partner on something soon.
yes, we
Yes,
would.
absolutely. We should make that happen.
If
Great.
you enjoyed tonight's program, please do join Matilda next month for the last in this year's Ask Us series, Ask a Spiritualist. So we're looking forward to that. Here at the Merchant's House, March is membership month. So Merchant's House members receive a variety of benefits, including free admission to the house and garden. We offer free walking tours for members and also special members-only events. At the beginning of April, museum members are invited to a behind-the-scenes collections talk with our curator. So you can become a member on our website at merchantshouse.org/support. Tickets to all of our upcoming events, both virtual and in person, can be found on our website at merchantshouse.org. Village Preservation, our co-sponsor this evening, also has a robust roster of programming. You can see their full calendar at villagepreservation.org. The Merchant's House is currently open to visitors on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays with options for both guided and self-guided tours. You can visit our website for tickets and more information. Tonight's program was presented free of charge, but we do hope that you will consider making a donation to support our future programming. Recordings, as I mentioned, of all of our free virtual talks can be found on our YouTube page. Visit us at youtube.com/merchantshousemuseum. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening.
Thank you, everyone.
And Gabrielle, this was just a wonderful chat tonight, and have a great night, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night. Thanks again, Gabrielle.
All right. Thank you so much, Matilda.